We're recording tonight's meeting and it will be available soon via the Permit Sonoma YouTube channel, where it will also have closed captioning. Next slide, please. So first, just a few Zoom basics. Most of them are probably pretty familiar by now, but please be sure you're muted and turn off your video. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can send direct chat messages to our team via the chat icon on your toolbar, which is likely down in the bottom of your screen in the middle. If you need subtitles, you can enable live transcription on the bottom right of your screen by clicking on the live transcript icon, then select show subtitled. Bienvenidos a nuestros vecinos quienes prefieren hablar en español. Perdone, pero no tenemos interpretación hoy. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor, mándanos un mensaje por chat. Next slide. So Zoom provides a couple of options for your audio. If you don't have a great internet connection or having a hard time hearing us, click on the up arrow next to the audio icon below the microphone at the bottom left of your screen. From there, you can choose to switch to phone audio and follow the instructions to link your audio and video or computer connection. If you have any other questions or issues using Zoom, please send Christina Smith a message in the chat. Next slide. So tonight's meeting is designed to share with you the draft Sonoma County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP, to encourage your input. We want to hear from you, as this is a community wildfire protection plan. In other words, our purpose is to engage Sonoma County residents in the review of the public draft of the Sonoma County CWPP and its meaningful implementation. Next slide. So in terms of our outcomes, or what we expect us all to leave this meeting with tonight, our intention is that Sonoma County residents will have a general understanding of what the CWPP includes, who's leading the process, and how it can be used, the findings of the CWPP and related wildfire risk assessments, the CWPP proposed priority projects and how to include future projects in the process. Next slide. How to submit comments on the public review draft on the CWPP and that you're empowered to do so. And finally, we as a CWPP team will receive initial feedback from you on the draft CWPP. Next slide. So finally, this is our agenda for tonight. We'll start with a quick overview of how we got here today, followed by a brief presentation by your County Supervisor Rabbit. We'll then provide a series of short presentations about the risk assessment we developed for the CWPP and the process to identify priority projects. Instead of our breakout rooms tonight, we'll open a general discussion listening session of the projects for this district and show you how to submit additional projects. Finally, we'll come back together to explain, well, not come back together, we'll finish by explaining in more detail how you can provide comments on the CWPP by February 28th, and they will close the meeting by 7:30, if not earlier. We will stick around another 15 minutes or so after that in our virtual parking lot to answer any final questions anyone might have following the meeting. We know that there are many of you with us tonight who have suffered enormously over the last 5 years from the profound losses due to wildfire. All of us here want to acknowledge your losses and thank you for your strength in coming tonight to collaborate towards finding ways to live with fire in Sonoma County. So we're now going to move into the presentations for the evening. We'll begin with a presentation by Caroleon Safford from Permit Sonoma. If you've been working in fire and especially community wildfire preparedness in Sonoma County, you've likely worked with Caroleon. She's been leading this effort for decades, including as a principal author of the 2016 CWPP that we've been updating. And she is spearheading this CWPP update process for the county. Caroleon will share with you the background and history to get us to this draft CWPP. Welcome, Caroleon. And you'll need to unmute.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming tonight. It's really exciting to have gotten the CWPP draft to this stage, and we're really thrilled with the product and happy to see engagement from the folks out there. So really briefly, what is the purpose of a CWPP? It was defined by Congress in 2003 in the Healthy Forest Restoration Act to bring together all of the wildland urban interface residents and groups and agencies to collaboratively identify wildfire issues and risks and prioritize areas and strategies to reduce risk. The first Sonoma County CWPP was signed in 2016, seemingly 3 minutes before everything changed in 2017 with the fires. Those fires forever changed Sonoma County's relationship to fire, And this update represents changes to our environment and how we as a community think about wildland fire. Next slide. So the collaborative aspect is one of 3 only requirements for a CWPP per the federal description of that. And so to achieve the collaboration with you folks out there, we've held 5 meetings in all supervisory districts to collect initial input. And we also have a large steering committee that has people from all kinds of agencies across the county. And we're doing ongoing outreach through, especially with the help of Fire Safe Sonoma and other groups, to solicit thoughts and opinions throughout the process. Next. So there are several changes that have been made since the original version. One of the most important of one is that it now not only exists in sort of print format as in the picture on the left, but it also is an interactive story map, which is where a lot of the really cool tools live. And that's where the hazard reduction tools are. And we'll be talking a lot more about that as we move on. So it's very different from the original version, although similar in many aspects. Next slide. The CWPP exists as a comprehensive resource that will help residents understand risks and undertake wildfire risk reduction projects on both public and private lands by hardening structures, learning how to reduce vegetation and where to do so in order to reduce risk and prepare for emergency. But what we're really hoping that it also does is really encourage collaborative review of projects across the county and bring folks together to talk about the projects that they want to do to reduce risk in their area. Next slide. One of the best tools, and we'll be talking about this exhaustively later on in the presentation, is the Wildfire Risk Index, which is such an awesome tool. So we've applied all kinds of new data to sort of update existing risk assessments. And what I kind of wanted to call out here is this, you'll see when you go to the hub site, and all these links will be posted for you later, this WRI statistic box. You can click on that. If you go in there, you can draw a polygon around the project and say, I want my project to look like this. And what it'll do is it'll pop out everything you need to know about what percentage of this is very high, what percentage is high risk, how many people are there, what are the demographic age groups. It's an awesome tool. So I think that this alone will really help folks move forward with their projects. Next. So the CWPP itself is, it's a lengthy document. We'll admit that straight up. We really wanted to make it like fit on the back of an envelope, but it didn't. It's roughly 90 pages in the actual document, with many hundreds of pages thereafter in the appendices. If you want a quick run through, read the executive summary, and then you can pick and choose where you go from there. But after that, we have sections that deal with demographics and values at risk and planning documents and all kinds of stuff like that. We have a whole chapter that deals with fire and fire ecology and consequences of suppression, how we've gotten here. So that's a really interesting chapter to read as well. There's a whole chapter on the wildfire assessment tools. Recommendations for key activities live in a section of their own. And the appendices contain a lot of detailed documents which supplement information that's in the CWPP. They're linked together, so you can go over there if you want, but there's a ton. The appendices will be updated over time, as will many other aspects that are not in the document itself. Next. This is super important. This is your CWPP. We want it to be a live document. We want to know what your thoughts are before we go to the final draft at the end of February. With your participation, we'll be able to update projects and add pertinent new information well into the future, which will keep the CWPP alive and maintain focus on how we as a county can work to reduce risk in the wildland urban interface. Next. So our next steps are public comments on the draft, and we'll go through how to do that later in the program. Public comments will be due by February 8th. We'll be presenting the plan for signature if all goes well. The first week of May, which is also Wildfire Prevention Week, which is very cool. And then we'll be annexing that plan into the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, which was just updated for the county. This will help us align the projects, which will help us with federal funding, which is great. And we'll be maintenance and project review, adding new CWPPs as they come along. If there are updated mapping links that we want to make sure people know about, we'll be hopefully keeping these things updated in the document as the year goes by until its next major revision, which will be in about 5 years. Next. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Carol. That was a great introduction to what we've been up to this last year. We will now hear a brief presentation from your County Supervisor, David Rabbit, regarding wildfire preparedness in the 2nd District. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Supervisor, and welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I appreciate that. First off, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Special thanks really to staff for the work on the Community Wildlife Protection Plan, or CWPP. It is much appreciated. I think thanks are due as well to all of our partners, and I see a lot of them on with us tonight as well. Fire Safe Sonoma, of course, CAL FIRE, I see Ben Nichols, our local fire agencies, Sonoma County Department of Emergency Management, Bureau of Land Management, and I'm sure there's others as well. So thank you all for the collaboration moving forward. And as Carly mentioned, the previous edition of the plan was in 2016, which is a little ironic that the next year the devastating Sonoma complex fires rolled out of Napa and in through the heart of Sonoma County and really changed so many things for so many people. And really in terms of the county, what we need to do to make sure that we're as resilient as possible going forward. This plan is really important because of that, the experiences that we've had. And certainly the 17 fires, unfortunately, were not the only ones. And we still have had complexes roll through, and certainly the Kincaid fire when I was chair in 2019, and the good job done in that fire, the evacuations and everything else. But we have so much work to do to continue to make sure that we're safe, especially with climate change upon us and the devastating impact of that series of droughts, floods, and wildfires in this of this scale. I think we have significant opportunities as well within this plan. And I know that the idea is to identify strategies and projects to reduce risk, but we do have some funding opportunities that exist now that hadn't existed in the past due to a series of investments that the Board of Supervisors have made, grants that we've achieved because of the experiences that we've had as well as the experience or the PG&E settlement funds, quite frankly. So I think that we really do have those opportunities. And I can tell you as an architect, I've designed homes in wildland or urban interface. I understand that home hardening is an important, best practices is important. All those things that we really have so much more knowledge today than even a few years ago, and we continue to go forward. But to have the ability to partner with homeowners, private homeowners, to really make sure that we can guide them in the best management going forward is so important, as well as, and I was really happy to see that the original act in 2003 really mentions healthy forests, because that's what it's really about. I think we use the term vegetation management, and that's a bit of a misnomer. It is really about healthy forests, and one could look only at the stresses that our woodlands have had, dead tan oaks over in West County, or sudden oak death syndrome that devastated certain areas of the county as well. So to be able to have healthy forests, to make sure that we can understand what we need to do to protect ourselves and reduce those hazards, make sure that firefighters have a fighting chance to get into those areas, I think is very important. And I thank you all for the work that you're doing. And I thank everyone for joining us today to really go through this item, provide your feedback, make sure it gets incorporated, and we can roll out the best document possible going forward. So thank you so much for having me too.
Thank you, Supervisor Rabbit, for your opening words this evening and setting the stage for why this CWPP is such an important public process for all Sonoma County residents. We very much appreciate you joining us and inspiring us tonight. So jumping into tonight's review of the CWPP findings, if you've participated in any of our CWPP process up to now, including via the online hub site and story maps that Caroline mentioned earlier and we posted in the chat, you've probably heard us talk about the risk assessment. Actually, Caroline mentioned it, the WRI. Esther Mendano, the CWPP project consultant lead team member from Digital Mapping Solutions, will now introduce the results from the risk assessment process she led. Please turn your attention to this pre-recorded video of Esther.
Thank you, Tracy, and hello, everyone. My name is Petronila Esther Mendano, but you can call me Esther. Today, I'm going to quickly review some of the content we have online that explains our wildfire risk index, as well as some of the tools we have that allow you to explore that index. Then I'll present some general results. We will start at the Sonoma County CWPP hub site. You can access the hub site directly from the main CWPP website by clicking on the Big Go button. Once there, you can read through our text that explains a little bit about the project and define some terms. Scrolling down, we come to our maps and tools. The very first image card is our Sonoma County CWPP project list. The second is the Sonoma County Wildfire Hazard Index. And the third is the Sonoma County Wildfire Risk Index, or WRI. Then we have our community base map with a lot of the baseline data we used in the CWPP. There's also the Sonoma County WRI statistics tool. And the next card is a map I put together overlaying fire history on top of our calculated WRI. There are a few more maps and tools up there, but for now, we'll click on the Sonoma County WRI statistics card to view it. This map is a web application that allows you to explore the Wildfire Risk Index in detail. You can use this tool to generate statistics and data to help you when submitting a project into our CWPP project ranking tool. Or you can use it to develop your projects in general or to get information you may need for a grant application or report. The Welcome Splash page has some important information you should take the time to read. These maps and tools will remain online so you can explore them anytime and for as long as you need. For now, I want to go through a summary of the results of the WRI for Sonoma County. On this slide, titled Sonoma County Statistics, I showed the average wildfire risk index for Sonoma County, which is 3 or high on our scale. Remember, we are using a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being extreme. Incidentally, the average wildfire hazard index and average ember load index for all of Sonoma County is also high. The average road index, which has a similar scale as the other indices but reversed, is 4 or very poor. For the CAL FIRE fire hazard severity zones, I didn't average those values because it's not spatially distributed across the county like our indices are. But the values range from low to high in the state responsibility areas and very high in the local responsibility areas. Finally, we estimated over 200,000 structures in the county with an estimated population of around 490,000. Roughly 187,000 parcels in the county are impacted, which is just about all of them. In the next few slides, I want to show how the data in the WRI can be used to highlight areas of concern in the county. This slide shows the highest WRI. That would be any area with a WRI of 5. And the areas with the highest WRI are highlighted in cyan on the map and include places high up in the Mayacamas Mountains in the northeastern portion of the county, as well as areas surrounding Cloverdale. Just east of Santa Rosa is a large area of concern, as well as the surrounding area around Sonoma Mountain and north and east of the town of Sonoma. West of Highway 1, we have scattered areas north of the Russian River that scored high for wildfire risk, as well as areas just south and west of Petaluma. This next slide looks very similar to the last one, but there's a subtle difference. Instead of just highlighting the areas with the highest risk index, I also selected for the poorest road access. Many of the same areas are highlighted, but a few were removed, particularly around cities which have better road access. This map is an example of how the WRI can be used to focus on areas or communities that are at highest risk and that have the worst road access according to our assessment. I won't read through all the areas listed on this slide, but remember you can explore the WRI in depth anytime using our online tools. This next slide is another example of how the WRI can be refined by selecting for both the highest risk index and the highest ember load index. Again, the areas shown are similar to the other maps, but we are homing in on the areas most at risk to extensive ember loads in the event of a fire. Places in the Mayacamas Mountains, like Black Oats, Big Sulphur Creek, and the lower portion of Mount St. Helena. North of Guerneville, areas surrounding Cazadero, Goat Rock, which is an area near Bear Pen Creek and not the Goat Rock over on the coast. Moorheart Ridge, Ward Creek, northwest of Pole Mountain, north of Rio Nido, northwest of Monterio, and finally south and east of Petaluma. That's all the time I have right now to go through what we learned through the CWPP risk assessment, but I'll be available for questions throughout this meeting and in the next few minutes.
Thank you all for listening to Esther sharing about the risk assessment and wildfire risk index. And someone suggested during the meeting there that we get that video live. And so we'll add that to the hub site. We have a few minutes now for questions and answers about the risk assessment and the results. So as you can see on the screen, we have that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions. And we may answer some of your questions, we will answer some of your questions live, and we may respond to others in the Q&A box. So you can also raise your hand because we have a smaller group. I'm going to pull up the Q&A, which I am not seeing. So Christina, I might need your help with the Q&A because I am not seeing the Q&A at the bottom of our screen.
I think folks may need to raise their hand.
Yeah, so you can
or ask questions in the chat.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions right now on the risk assessment, go ahead and speak up. We're doing great on time. Either raise your hand or send us something in the chat.
And of course,
Here we go. Rocio Rodriguez. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. So my name is Rocio Rodriguez, and I live in D2 in Petaluma. So this is interesting for me to see. I have more of a comment and then a question. First, my comment is that the way we talk about outreach and engagement with community, I think needs to change. I only found out about this, and I am I work for COAG, Community Organizations Active in Disaster, and we're a coalition of nonprofits that respond together to disasters and recover and prepare for them. So this is really interesting to know about, and we actually went through a process with the emergency operation plan of updating that with the Department of Emergency Management, and that was a really comprehensive and detailed process that included community engagement. Oh, and I just saw that you wanted me to start my video. Sorry. Okay, is it up?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. And so I really think that should be a model. A lot of people, more people need to know about this. They need to know about this plan and need to have input on it. And so I just encourage working with the Office of Equity, learning what they did for the EOP. There's just so many more ways that this can be done. I would really love to partner with you all as well. And then this kind of leads me to my question, which is, will you do any other outreach, or if we invite you to present at a meeting, would you be available to do that?
So let me say, short answer is yes. And we're going to be talking, we have a whole listening session later on in the agenda where we could dive into this a lot deeper. Right now, we were looking for any specific questions about the risk assessment, but we would definitely love to talk to you, especially about how to reach out to the Latino community and get more engagement in the process. So are you okay with holding that until we go into the listening session after?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Awesome.
Rocio, I just saw your email right before we got this meeting going. So I will be responding to you and would love to have some direct conversation with you about this.
Great.
Yeah, and we are always trying to improve, outreach and engagement processes. So, I'm Bradley Dunn. I'm the policy manager, and outreach engagement is, falls under my responsibility. So we have done several of these kinds of meetings, but in terms of ways to engender, more participation, we're always interested. So we're happy to set up a meeting offline and, participate in further meetings with anybody that you suggest or do continued outreach on this and other projects. So
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Thank you. Thanks for letting me jump.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up and for being interested and willing to help bring this to your communities where you work. Does anybody have any questions specifically on the risk assessment, how it happened, how Esther brought all the different data together that was already out there, what the results are, how you might access it online, anything like that right now? Otherwise, we can go ahead and move forward, and you can certainly bring that up again later on during the listening session.
Tracy, it looks like Ying Lin has a question. And I don't know how to respond. So if I'm interested in getting access to the GIS data in the CWPP report and they are not shown on the hub, is there someone I can contact to request that access?
Yes, and Esther, why don't you take that one?
Sure. If you go to the hub site, anything, that's what's so great about a hub site is that anything I share on there is automatically available to download or to view online to use in either other ArcGIS, or you can even link to it using I want to say either JSON or WMS or whatever it is. But anyway, the point is that it's all available there, and that's why we used a hub site. And I can show it to you maybe later on when we have more time. I'll show you exactly how to do it. It's just on the left-hand side. There'll be 3 bars for additional option menus, and you click on that, and then there'll be a left-hand panel that'll show up. Click on data, and all the data that's on there is available. Did I
Awesome.
answer the question?
I think so. Ying, did you have a further question about that? If so, feel free to unmute and speak up.
And I'm seeing there was another question on here from Christopher Nussbauer regarding, that came to me directly. Okay. Which regions south and east of Petaluma specifically have limited road access? And that, again, I would recommend that you pop onto the hub site after the meeting's over, of course, and take a look, and you'll be able to see exactly where those are. Esther, do you want to address the road network ranking a little bit, or do we do that later?
We could, it's explained, we could do it later, or we could do it now. I think
Go
we're
for
good
it.
on time. Are we good on time?
We're good. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. So again, if you go to the hub site, I don't know if I want to, do you guys want me to do that right now? I could.
Sure, we have a couple minutes. Go for
Yeah,
it.
I just have to change my sharing. And let me just move this.
And in the chat box, you all see the link to the hub site, so you can click on that and access it at the same time if you like. But Esther's going to bring it up here live in a moment.
So if you ever, or I know a lot of this is buried, and if you're not used to it, it can be a little overwhelming. But like I was saying, we didn't want to spend too much time explaining each and every single thing, but the Sonoma County Wildfire Risk Index card will open up a story map, and it tells you right here what it is, in case you were wondering. All the different names to all these things. And this will explain all the different inputs that went into the wildfire risk index. And so I talk a little bit about how the road network was done. And basically, Kevin Lacefield with Sonoma County back in 2019. So it is a little outdated. It'd be nice to get that updated. But he did based on road density, number of roads into and out of a community, and speed limits, how fast how quickly someone can move along the road. Based on those factors, he ranked areas within the county. And so all of that information was added to, or that analysis was added to our analysis. So it's right here. So this shows it's relative, right? It's like relatively how easy it is to get in and out of places. And so you can zoom into the map using this tool down here. And so of course, where there's lots of roads, it's easy to get around. Where there's a lot less roads, it's harder to get there, basically. Hopefully that answered the question or helped. And again, all this data is available. If I go back to the hub site, it's here. And so if I wanted to get the road index data is built into the wildfire index. You can click on this, go to the layer, and then it'll ask you whether you want to download it. This is the raw information, so it's not colorful like all the other ones. And
Great.
I'm always available for questions.
Thank you, Esther. Maybe you can close that out and pull the slides back up. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We are going to have some time later in the evening for jumping in more detail for anything you have questions about and comments. So with that, the next slide is coming up. Part of the CWPP process is to identify a list, and it's the next slide, Esther, is to identify a list of prioritized projects to reduce hazardous fuels and identify actions to reduce structural ignitability, which means losing less homes and other buildings to fire. Carol Leone introduced our project ranking tool earlier. Esther will now explain that tool in more detail via another pre-recorded video. So please give your attention now to Esther regarding priority projects and recommendations in the draft CWPP and how to submit your projects.
Hello again. I'm going to go over how we handle the input that we received from you all. As you may know, last year we held 5 public meetings asking you about fire prevention and fuel mitigation projects you thought should be implemented in your neighborhood and Sonoma County. We summarized that input and used your project ideas to create our CWPP recommendations. The summary of projects from each meeting can be reviewed via the hub site meeting summaries. Let's go there now. Remember, you can access the hub site via the Big Go button from the main CWPP website, or you can use the URL that we'll copy into the chat box. You'll find the meeting summaries towards the bottom on the hub site. Just keep scrolling down, and you can click on any of the map images and a PDF document will open containing the summary for that meeting. We also have the data summarized by an Excel sheet that we can provide upon request. Note that many of the project ideas submitted during our public meetings were just that, ideas. As great as they are not fully developed projects ready for funding that we can add to our project list. So instead of listing these project ideas on our project list, the CWPP recommendations were developed with your project ideas in mind. Please review these carefully to make sure your project idea is reflected in one of those recommendations. You can find the recommendations in Chapter 5 of the draft CWPP. The CWPP recommendations are general actions that affect the entire county or could affect the entire county. For example, many concerned participants cited the need for improved road access and evacuation preparedness and education. So our recommendations for evacuation readiness within Sonoma County include developing targeted evacuation preparedness education materials for diverse populations, improving street and route signage throughout the county, and identifying evacuation routes in communities that are constrained by few or narrow routes. The project list in Appendix A of the CWPP contains all the fully developed projects submitted formally to us, either via email or the mapping tool we used last year. If you have a fully developed project that did not get on the list, either whether it's funded or seeking funding, we want to know about it. A fully developed project is one that has a targeted area identified with well-developed project goals, a description, timeline, and a preliminary budget. To submit your project so that it will be listed in the CWPP, we ask that you please use our project ranking tool, which can be accessed from the Sonoma County CWPP project list page. It is the first image card you'll encounter on our hub site. And once there, you'll find the actual project list in a spreadsheet format. This is a read-only Google Sheet containing all the projects submitted to the Sonoma County CWPP. The first tab has all the projects listed in the order they were submitted. And the second tab explains how the point system works and how a first, second, or third priority is assigned based on those points and the overall project budget. Directly under the spreadsheet is a section containing links to the project ranking tool. Please read through the text we provided to help you fill out the form on the project ranking tool. A list of questions is provided as a separate PDF document that you can review on a separate browser tab. Clicking on the project ranking tool button will take you to a 10-page form. Yes, that's right, 10 pages. It will take you some time to fill this out. So again, please read through the text on the previous page to ensure you are ready to answer all the questions. The last section on the Sonoma County CWPP project list webpage is a map of all the projects listed. From this map, you can click on any project submitted and get all the information entered for that project. Use this map to find out what specific and detailed projects are planned in the vicinity of your area of interest. That's all the time I have right now. Remember, you have until February 28th to submit a project to be included in the 2022 CWPP, after which you can still submit a project using our online project ranking tool. However, anything submitted after February 28th will not be included in this version in the 2022 CWPP. But it will be included after review, next year's review. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, for that introduction. Carolion is now going to explain the projects in more detail, including the projects proposed for this supervisorial district. So Carolion, you'll need to unmute and turn off your video and take it away.
Okay, so this is the overall map of all of the projects that have been entered in through the tool or through email to Esther. And unfortunately, the second district, we don't have anything yet. So, but there's time is the good news. And that's one of the things I think we'll be talking about when we break out to more discussion. Next slide, please. So, yep, none formally submitted. So let's work on that. Next. So again, a well-developed project is one that has a target area identified, well-developed project goals, well-developed written project description, a realistic timeline, a preliminary budget, and that addresses the concerns identified in the CWPP list. And that is how the projects get ranked and ordered. Next. So what we're hoping to do with this tool in the future is once everybody gets their projects listed into the CWPP, they're going to need to be updated over time. Projects may have gotten funded or got combined with another project to make it a bigger project, or any number of things. And so what we're hoping to do is pull together a yearly or twice yearly meeting of a whole group of people to sort of look at the projects that are in the tool and update the site and update the rankings and the priorities of those projects. We're hoping Fire Safe Sonoma might take a lead in this, but we're having, we have not yet directly identified who's exactly going to do that. Next. So what this list will do, and this I think is one of the most important things about the CWPP, the project list and the map, which we saw on the earlier screen, really is the only place in the county where you can take a global look at everything that's been entered. Where are the people who are working on projects? What projects are in there? What do they address? Are some areas underserved, like District 2 doesn't have anything in there yet? So what do we do to get that ball rolling? Is there duplication? Are there areas where we have two different groups suggesting the exact same property in the same project footprint? Can those groups get together to make more efficiency in the project and make it more desirable? So that improved cooperation, I think, is really important. People can also pop on that list, take a look at other people's projects and go, hey, that's a good idea. I'm going to incorporate that into my project. So having this tool well populated with projects will really help in so many ways. Not only is it very helpful to anybody seeking funding, many funders request that a project is identified in a CWPP if they're putting in a grant proposal. So it's great to have your project in there. You can click the yes box. The Open Space District, who is managing the PG&E grant program funds, is using the tool. So a lot of the projects that are being entered on there for their grant program will end up on this map. But this is, I think, a really important gap in the county is where are all these projects listed and how can we work together to make projects more effective and more successful in funding. Next. So the ranking tool, as you're going through, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions and it's going to provide a ranking score that's based on what's the overall risk in the area. So when you use the tool I described earlier, where you can draw your project footprint, it's going to tell you that the average risk in this area is a 4 or a 3. And then it's based on the nature of the project. What does the project do? If it's just a project that's only going to do one thing, you'll get 1 point. If you're doing 4 things, you're doing a vegetation management project, you're doing education and outreach for the community, you're engaging the local fire folk and other things. You get points for each of those you do, which is a great way to make projects that do more at one time. But we do ask that people stay realistic when they're designing their projects. You do not want to design a grant program that says you're going to do more than your group has the capacity to do. So I'd caution you about that, but definitely take a look at the inputs for the ranking tool and start thinking about designing projects that will come up with a high ranking and be functional and easy to complete. Next. Again, that's where you go. There's the link to the site. You can run through the tool and do a fake project and back out at the end. Don't hit submit if you're doing that, but you can do that to take a look and see how it works. Next.
Cool. Thank you, Caroleon. So we've got some time now for questions and answers about how to submit projects or about any of the projects that have been submitted for other parts of the county, if you might be interested, or anything else that Esther or Caroleon spoke about in terms of our priority projects. And why don't you send comments to me if you don't want to speak up? Otherwise, go ahead and raise your hand. And when I call on you, unmute and turn on your video and you can ask your question. That looks like Tom. Go for it. You'll need to unmute, Tom. Can you unmute?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're live. Go for
I
it.
appreciate that. Thank you. Tom Conlon, I'm actually not in District 2. I missed the District 1 meeting. So,
Nope, it's happening, I think, next Thursday. So you
oh,
have
good.
tonight's the first one.
Good. I am surprised that District 2 didn't have any applications yet. I have some general questions about the CWPP draft plan that's been circulated, but
We're
I'm
gonna talk
gathering
about
that,
that in just a minute.
okay, so I
let's-
can hold my comments until that you've done your presentation there. I don't have specific questions about the tool, except to ask, is there a way to do some of the project types that the plan identifies as the highest priority? For example, home hardening and that's probably the most important one I think I noticed in the list. So that's my question. Thank you.
Cool. And I'll turn this to Caroline in just a minute, but take a look at chapter 5 in the CWPP, because that's where we make recommendations that are more countywide. Caroline, do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between the recommendations and projects and how to advance home hardening?
Yeah, home hardening is my particular favorite topic, and I think that that's one of the most important things for residents to understand to reduce risks. So we're all for home hardening, and again, it's one of only 3 requirements for a CWPP is that you address home hardening. And so absolutely there is discussion of that in there. And Tom, I'm not sure exactly what your question was. Can you repeat your question?
So because I came on just a little bit late, I'm a little bit disoriented. So that's probably why my question was hard to understand. I am considering, as many of my neighbors are, how to make our neighborhood more resilient in the face of these wildfire threats. And so I'm curious to understand more about how the project ranking tool works and whether certain types of projects are, whether certain types of projects are being, if the funds are being prioritized to the project types which will have the best outcomes.
They're being, structure hardening is one of the things that you can put a check in the box in the ranking tool, both for education and outreach and for projects that actually attempt to harden homes on this. So yes, they will be, but there's a wide range. There's 14 different priority project types that are all scored on there. So my recommendation is go in and take a look at the tool and you'll see how it works.
Great. And then
make sure and pass on any questions.
And then as far as from sort of a public policy perspective, will we be able to see through the tool once project types are performed, once projects are performed, where the money has been flowing and be able to kind of get a sense for the outcomes from the spending of the funds? Is the program overall cost effective in the sense that we are reducing fire risk in meaningful ways for all the money that we're spending on it? That's my general question. And again, I'm coming on late, so I'm not as articulate about this as I'd like to be.
Generally speaking, that's one of the, and I think there's a lot of fire folk in the room and they're all going to be nodding their heads in the background. One of the hard things about fire prevention is that if you've been successful, nothing happened. So it's actually a very difficult thing. I don't mean to sound flippant, but it's a very difficult thing to quantify. Really. And if we had an area that burned into an area where some hardened homes were hardened and some weren't, you might be able to come up with some data from that. But I don't know that we'll be able to track that data through the CWPP format into the future, or if we know who's getting grants and who's not, we'll be able to see some trends reflected in the ranking tool. But yeah, that's going to be a challenge, but it's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question on the projects and the ranking tool before we jump into our open conversation where you can talk about this and the risk assessment and the process and all that?
Supervisor Rabbit, did you have a comment that you would like to make?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I just wanted to mention, and I appreciate Tom's, I think Tom asked the $64,000 question, and one that we're still making sure that we grapple with, but I think it's only through these processes that we can identify projects, score them, and really make sure that we know that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck going forward. And I just want to say, you know, District 2 is a little more unique in terms of the fire reduction strategies than certainly we haven't been borne the brunt of those types of fires from Napa with those wicked winds. But we have our own very unique grassland threats, and we have a smattering of different areas with some woodland threats as well. Just a little different in the South County. And that's probably why you don't see any outside entity proposing a CWPP project at this particular point in time on the landscape scale. But I will say that the home hardening is a countywide issue and part of the CWPP. And I know a lot of people down in District 2 that are taking advantage or, you know, are worried about that as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, as well as different road turnout projects to allow evacuation and fire apparatus to get up and down the longer, narrower, you know, like a Sonoma Mountain Road and those types of roads, to make sure that we can have that traffic be more efficient and be able to pass one another. So I just wanted to make mention of that. We look forward to, if there's an outside entity out there that wants to propose projects, we look forward to making sure that we include them and make sure that we're all as safe as we can be throughout the county.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect segue actually into our listening session. And what we're doing now is we have time basically until about 7:15 for an open conversation. If you have any comments, if you've had a chance to look at the document, you have specific questions about what's in there. I think a couple of people brought some things up earlier. Rocio, if you have more comments about the engagement, if anybody has further comments or questions about what we've already talked about, now is the time. Again, you can send those to me in the chat. You can raise your hand. And then we're assuming that, you know, once we finish talking about questions, we will take some time to look at some of the projects that were suggested in the community meetings, the public input community meetings. Can you go back actually a slide there? Thanks, Esther. In the community meetings back when did we do them? A year ago, back in April and May last year. So before we start, I just want to share some ground rules for you to abide by tonight so we can have an effective and respectful process. So our ground rules are that this is an opportunity to share your ideas, opinions, and questions. Everyone has an equal voice here, and we ask you to respect others' ideas and opinions. And if you can't abide by those ground rules tonight, please let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we assume you are cool with that. So who's got questions, comments? Raise your hand, send me a comment in the chat directly to me, and don't be shy. I believe there were a couple of comments earlier where I said, oh, we can talk about that later in the listening session if you remember who you were and what those comments or questions were. Feel free to speak up now.
Well, this is Esther. Just to jumpstart the conversation, what I'm showing on the screen right now is the project ideas that we gathered during our first meeting last year. And these are all great ideas. And it would be great if someone took ownership of one of these ideas and created a real project that we could put on our project list. You know, the one that got the most votes was the bilingual outreach materials for ranchers and workers. So let's do it. Who wants to take it on?
And Carolyn, did you want to go ahead then and talk about these project ideas while we're waiting for folks to speak up?
Yeah, I can kind of touch on a couple of them. The outreach materials was also a very high priority request back in 2016. So this is clearly something that would be really great to push forward. And some of those materials exist already. CAL FIRE has a lot of great stuff, and other folks have those bilingual materials. So if what we need to do is figure out where they are and get them out, we just need someone to take ownership of these projects. And that's the difficult part here, is that some group needs to coalesce to start talking about, creating these projects, because it is a fair amount of work. I think fire agencies are often involved in that, as they have time and capacity to do so, which is often a problem. And sometimes it's neighborhood groups. Creating a fire safe council for the Petaluma area might be a good first start. There's always been a lot of concern in that area about eucalyptus, and a little bit out in the west, that gorse that we have out in the Bodega area is a concern for folks. And how do you deal with that? That's a messy problem. Emergency egress and access, more outreach, underground power lines in critical areas, demonstration projects like at Helen Putnam Regional, wildland fire apparatus for Petaluma Fire, grazing capacity to reduce fuels, especially in areas where you have formerly grazing land that abuts on what are now housing areas. That's a great project. Home hardening, fuels reduction, more roadways. So really it's what are we going to do, and who's going to do it, and can we get it going? Jessica.
Hold on a second. We've got a couple of comments and questions up ahead. So,
Jessica is the local fire girl and wants to address fire safe communities in Petaluma. So we might want to start with her comments and then feedback.
Okay, go ahead, Jessica. I didn't see your hand or comment. Go for it. And then we've got Tyler, a couple comments from Tyler, Diane, Tom, and Rosia. So go ahead, Jessica.
No worries, Tracy. I know Carleon, so I sent her a little message. I'm the fire marshal here in the city of Petaluma, and I just wanted to let everyone in attendance tonight that we're actually working with CAL FIRE and our first community in Petaluma for a fire safe community. So if there are other communities that are interested, please reach out. We have a specialist in our office that is coordinating that as well. So we'd be happy to discuss that with you, and also increasing our involvement in Fire Safe Sonoma for that coordination as well.
That's excellent. Excellent. So it sounds like folks can contact you with some specific local ideas on how to get involved there.
And I'll send Carleon the best contact information so she can put that out.
And if you don't mind also putting it in the chat. Oh, right. You can't chat to us. You can send it to Carla and she can share it in the chat.
Yep.
Thank you, Jessica.
And thank you, Jessica. That's great news. I'm really happy to hear it. And Roberta's on the line tonight too. So I'm sure she heard you.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, we're very excited as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to mention that Tyler pasted here. I'm going to paste this into the chat for everybody that CAL FIRE does have some materials already created in, oh, no, that didn't work. I wasn't able, let's try it again, in Spanish. Between CAL FIRE and Ready, Set, Go, and there's some other materials out there in Spanish. There's some great materials now, way better than they were just a few years ago. So those are a great baseline. Part of the idea with this is to have them more focused on local needs and targeted local issues. So with that, I'm going to go with Tom and then Rosia. Go ahead, Tom, unmute yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity again. So I notice on the list here at the bottom, you have Map Your Neighborhood program. And we've had some discussion of that here in Sonoma Valley. And back at the beginning of last year, I submitted some concept ideas to the Valley of the Moon Water District's local hazard mitigation planning process. because I've been concerned that the Map Your Neighborhood program is largely self-directed by community volunteers. It tends to be skewed and self-selected toward those who are the most able, most privileged members of our community who have the most free time to be able to kind of self-organize themselves. And I'm an old program design person, so this is why I think like this. It occurred to me that it would be helpful to understand which neighborhoods are being served by the Map Your Neighborhood program, and to be able to do maybe some more targeted outreach to those neighborhoods that are underserved. And so I wrote some of this up. I have kind of a one-page, real simplified idea here, but it would be essentially using the PG&E transformer network, the residential transformer network, which is about 10 houses or 12 houses on each transformer. And if we could get access to that data, we could use that as the unit of Map Your Neighborhood organization. So I'd be happy to share that, as I did with the local hazard mitigation planning process here in the Valley. With this group, if there's a person I could send something like this to, I'd be happy to do so.
Great, thank you. And we'll explain a little bit later how to submit comments, written comments, if you want to send us more detail. But meanwhile, Roberta, do you want to talk a little bit about the Map Your Neighborhood process? And then Rocio, you're on deck.
Yeah, the primary mover and shaker with Map Your Neighborhood in Sonoma County, it started in Sonoma County. Skip Jarls, he's the Sebastopol emergency manager. If you reach out to him, he would be more than happy, I'm sure, to meet with you and whatever group you've already got starting to form with regard to that endeavor to get you guys up and running. He's or at least get you pointed in the right direction. He's a little overwhelmed and not really interested in getting a whole bunch of communities on board, but he can, I'm sure, get you started and pointed in the right direction. And there are a couple other communities in Sonoma County that have used his model to do the same thing, and they're still calling it Map Your Neighborhood. Oakmont's a good example of that. It's throughout the community of Oakmont in the city of Santa Rosa. It's a good program, and it's honestly, in my opinion, it's a good start to get your community, some community organization going and growing. And then ideally downstream from there, you get a lot of folks together taking on things like doing a local CWPP or risk assessment and then applying for grants, et cetera. With regard to the PG&E transformer information, that would be an inquiry through the Pacific Gas and Electric Utility. I don't know how to go about getting that kind of data. And my experience with them is they hold their information pretty close to their chest with regard to that. So hopefully that helped answer some of your inquiry.
Thank you, Roberta. And also, if you Google Map Your Neighborhood, you'll see that it's a program that's been used really extensively up in Seattle for earthquake preparedness. So it's got some really good, solid back to it. So Rocio, please go ahead and unmute, and the floor is yours.
Thanks. So Tom, I will also add on that there is a Spanish-speaking Map Your Neighborhood in Sonoma Valley. I know it's quite small, and because of the pandemic, they haven't been as extensive.
We just lost Rocio, so hopefully she'll come back in, and we will continue on with her comment. Bummer. I do want to mention that Diane Kane put in the chat. I've had to evaluate. Oh, there you go. We lost you, Rocio. Go ahead, try.
Hi. Thanks. The Map Your Neighborhoods and CERT are also looking at establishing Spanish-speaking cohorts within the cities where they already exist. Also, just to finish that comment, and then my question was, how was the outreach done to collect these project ideas? What groups were you going to, and what community members did you hear from?
I can start that conversation by saying we started a year ago back, I think it was April, May, I'm pretty sure, of 2021. We had a series of 5 public meetings like we're doing now, 1 in each supervisorial district. And that's where we started the conversation. And following that, I know that Esther received some input through the hub site, and Caroline and Esther and Roberta certainly was sharing it through all the Fire Safe Sonoma meetings, but Caroline, do you want to speak a little bit to that, of the other outreach that you guys have been doing over the last year?
Most of the outreach was through the meetings, and then through Roberta's Fire Safe Alliance group and other folks out there in the community as best as we could reach them. We do still have time to add comments as necessary. So you and I can definitely have a conversation next week and revisit all of that. Rocio, I'd be more than happy to do so.
And we did talk about going and making presentations to groups directly. So if there's an invite available to do that, let us know. Obviously, COVID kind of changed that a lot for folks. And we also have a steering committee of 20-ish folks. I actually don't remember how many people on the steering committee, and they all represent different organizations. And so a lot of those folks brought information out to their networks. But yeah, go ahead. Any other comments on that? There was a lot more we would have loved to have been able to do. Rocia, did you want to add anything else there? Or you can follow up directly with Caroline next week.
I'll follow up directly. Thank you. I appreciate the information.
Really appreciate you bringing it up. It's important. So Diane Kane had a comment in the chat. I've had to evacuate onto Sonoma Mountain Road and the traffic didn't move at all. Just wanted to mention it because it surprised me and made me wonder how to improve that. Anybody want to speak to that? And Esther, how did that show up? Do you recall how Sonoma Mountain Road showed up in that road assessment?
I don't know about the road assessment, but for the risk assessment, the entire Sonoma Mountain area is bad. I mean, I wouldn't live there. Joking. It's a joke, sort of.
Okay, and thank you, Diane. We've got that noted, so we'll make sure that gets in. Any other comments, questions? Otherwise, we can go back to looking at this list of project ideas. Jenny Blaker, go ahead, please unmute and turn on your video.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Great. Okay. Well, this isn't really a project, but I wondered to what extent any research has been done or is being done or will be done on the impacts of vegetation management, because it seems as though there's a sort of implicit assumption that the projects chosen for vegetation management will be helpful and useful. But I know there's a lot of scientific research suggesting that actually certain kinds of thinning and logging can actually make matters worse because of the way that if you remove vegetation, the soil dries out, the vegetation dries out, the areas become more flammable. Fires actually can go through them faster and have more of an impact than they would have done otherwise. There are we've seen pictures of places where houses are burned to the ground surrounded by healthy trees. And also there's been research by Dr. Alexander Seifert, who's worked with Jack Cohen, who I see is mentioned in the report, on thousands and thousands of case studies showing that vegetation management beyond 100 foot around homes and communities doesn't help. And because it has to be done over and over again, repeatedly, it can actually make matters worse, again, because of invasive grasses, for example, coming in, which are even more flammable than what was there before. So it seems essential that some kind of follow-up monitoring should be being done to show what are the impacts of vegetation management, what happens if an area is cleared and managed and a fire comes through again, or does it, those kinds of questions, looking at before and after impacts of vegetation management. So I'm just curious as to whether that in itself could be a project or whether anyone is going to be monitoring the projects with those kinds of questions in mind, as well as actually impacts on soil and water and wildlife habitat, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I can actually speak to that. I've been doing some research lately, more of a research summary and writing up. The North Coast Resources Partnership is about to come up with a regional priority plan for the entire North Coast, from Sonoma County all the way up to Del Norte and over, including part of Modoc along the Klamath River. And I was looking at a lot of what the latest research is, and there's a great article put out, Susan Pritchard, Pritchard. She's, I want to say, the University of Washington. She's the lead author, and it's called something like 10 Common Questions or something like that. And it's an excellent summary of all the latest research on a lot of those topics that you talk about, and it links to all the research. So I strongly encourage you to look at that. So that's the first part. Second part is clearly any prescription. I'm also a forester, but my training's in landscape ecology. Any prescription or any fuel treatment, they're general words. So you can use that same language to go out and basically clear cut and leave a few trees, or you can use it as a way to manage the forest that's really ecologically based for where you live. And that's what our intention is that anything we're doing is looking at being ecological. It's really restoration forestry and ecological restoration to try to bring the forests and the grasslands and chaparral shrublands back to a more resilient state because of the lack of fire and the very effective fire suppression. Our forests are really out of whack, and that's not a technical term, but especially if you look along the landscape, we have this excess of these younger, denser forests, and we have less of the older forests with the bigger trees that are adapted to fire. So we're looking at how do we help deal with that? What can we do as humans to interfere and make some change so that our landscapes are more resilient versus doing it at, the natural time scale, which could be pretty devastating for our human communities over the next few decades. So it's a tough one. It's important that whoever's designing the project, that they're really looking at those ecological restoration principles. So I encourage you to look at that Pritchard article. I encourage you to look this summer when the NCRP, the North Coast Resources Partnership Regional Priority Plan comes out. I want to say it's going to be released for public review in May, and we're going to have a lot of great research in there. And then finally, Alex Sifford's research is great. I support a lot of her work, and Jack Cohen. Part of her research and some of those studies are really more focused on Southern California communities and more chaparral ecosystems. And so definitely the science all shows that when you're in a chaparral system, treating fuels more than 100 feet out rarely is going to make a difference on the home. And this comes back to Tom's question and what Caroline mentioned earlier is that we know, and Sonoma County is actually a national leader in this, that, they got awarded, you all got awarded that $37 million BRIC grant, because Sonoma County is really leading this, that starting with the home and then working out is what matters. And we've seen that in the recent fires, that hardening that home envelope and that first 5 feet is what's most important. And at the same time, we need to be looking at, are there places where it makes sense to put a shaded fuel break around a community near a ridgetop? My personal preference is we need to be restoring our ridgetops back to open grassland meadows of native grasses. I think that a lot of our ridgetops are covered with forests. And if you look at photos from the 50s, 100 years ago, they weren't forested. And those are the areas that we're seeing burning a lot. So I'm going to step off my soapbox because it's something that I care a lot about, but I encourage you to start with that Susan Pritchard article and then and look at the NCRP plan, and please go ahead and submit your comments, and Christina will be letting you know in a moment here. Actually, we're just about out of time. So with that, Diana, will you go ahead? Diane, please turn on your video and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize. This is Sheila, not Diane. And I wanted to make one comment about the creeks and the overgrowth in the creeks in Petaluma. And, you know, listening to some of the conversation you and Jenny Blaker just had, of course, the most important thing is home hardening. I live in an HOA and we're along Lynch Creek in Petaluma. And there was a fire in the creek several months ago. And, you know, the fire department came out and they talked to us about home hardening. We did end up working with Circuit Rider to do some brush clearing in our creek. And it got me thinking of this bigger picture, which is there's a lot of overgrowth in the creeks here in Petaluma. And one of the biggest issues with getting a larger project, say to go for PG&E funding, is that each portion of each creek is a different stakeholder or landowner is responsible for that section. So I don't know if that's, you know, trying to mitigate some of the fuel loads in the creeks is something that we want to be thinking about. But because I do understand that home hardening is probably more important, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, that we did end up doing creek cleanup as part of our efforts. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. That's great. And I think we did see that in Boulder, that some of those open space areas and creeks are basically can be the wick into communities. And following up on what I think it was Jenny who just said, you know, we have to balance that with ecological considerations because, and especially in California, we have a lot of laws to protect our riparian areas and their critical habitat. But we found, you know, a lot of groups, I think that the folks in the Mattole have done a lot of great work on that. And how do you do creekside restoration, riparian zone restoration, where you're still, again, you're maintaining those big trees and you're maintaining shade, and you don't want to be doing anything that's going to be destabilizing the slopes and causing more sediment to come in the creeks. And all that said, Fire Safe Sonoma, you know, working with your local fire safe council is how to address those issues and how you go out and design that project and get all the landowner agreements so you can do a project across multiple ownerships. And that is, those are the kind of more shaded fuel break landscape level projects that we do around communities and through communities in addition to the home hardening. No, Carolyn, did you want to add anything to that as we wrap this up? And then I'm going to turn it over to Christina to share with everybody how to provide their comments.
Yeah, the issue of multiple landowners is sort of welcome to Sonoma County. We have one of the most parcelized forest ecosystems in the state, and I think probably even larger. In other words, we have very little public land on proportionally. And most of our forested lands are in small parcels. So almost any project that you need to do, you're going to have to coordinate with a whole lot of people to get their permission to do a project on their land. And yes, that makes it very, very challenging to do fuels management work out there in the world. And when you combine that with, you know, the necessity to understand what the needs are for the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, doing large-scale projects to reduce risk outside of the house footprint, it is difficult. And that's what community groups really, we need to become more sophisticated about learning how to do that and more collaborative, taking to find ways to help folks do that. And Fire Safe Sonoma and a lot of folks are working on processes to help that process along. But yes, it is difficult.
Thank you, Caroleon. And now Christina Smith from Permit Sonoma is going to explain how you can submit your comments on the draft CWPP through February 28th, and then what the process will be to complete the CWPP. So please give Christina your attention and welcome, Christina.
Hey, everybody. I'll just be going over a quick walkthrough of how to comment on the CWPP. First, what you'll do, and Tracy will go ahead and put a link in the chat, is you'll go to the CWPP project page on the Permit Sonoma website. Then you'll go ahead and click the link to the CWPP draft at the top of the page. It's in that like yellowish green box. And then you're going to go ahead and click, it'll take you to the draft, and you'll click on the box. You'll see on the right side, there's a panel. It'll ask for your name, or it'll say add a comment. You'll click on that box, and then I'll ask for your name. You can also put your initials if you want to leave some kind of anonymity. And then you're just going to click continue as guest. And from there, you'll be able to comment. And then next slide. Then I'm also going to go over the review process, the review and signing process. So as of right now, we'll be holding a few more meetings this month with the other supervisory districts. Sorry, it's a mouthful. And then we'll be asking all of you to go ahead and add any projects that you think we need to consider in the project ranking tool on the CWPP hub site. We shared the link. We'll share it again later if you need. And then we also ask that you review and comment. We have the comment period due, all comments due in by February 28th. So that way we can integrate it into the draft. And we'll send that draft to our steering committee. We'll have a meeting in February, go over that. And once that's all taken care of, we'll be taking it to the Board of Supervisors in May during Wildfire Prevention Week. And then after that, we'll be asking for all final signatures. And once it's been signed off, we'll be incorporating it into the CWPP, into the sorry, next slide. I should have said next slide. Sorry, Esther. And then we'll be incorporating it into the multi-district jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. And that's it.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions on that process? We did that really quickly. Christina and a lot of the Permit Sonoma staff are available to help you navigate that, especially if you have issues with doing things online. If you want to figure out how to download it, all that kind of stuff, you can send an email to the team, which we will share here in a moment. But before we get into that last slide of sharing the information, are there any questions about that process and how to submit your comments?
And or do any of our fire folk who are, thank you for being here, you guys. Does anybody have anything they want to throw in at this point? And I don't want to put you on the spot, so don't feel compelled, but if any of you have a comment, please pop in now. I'll take that as a no.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for being here tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time working with us on completing the CWPP. So Sonoma County has a Community Wildfire Protection Plan that's created and led by you, the dedicated residents of Sonoma County. Please let your friends, family, and colleagues know they can continue to participate in this process through February 28th. As well as getting more information via the links on this slide in the chat. And we don't actually have a slide of the upcoming meetings, but we're meeting next Wednesday and Thursday, the 19th and 20th, and then the following 26th and 27th. If you go to the Permit Sonoma website, which is here on this slide, and Christina's going to be putting these in the chat right now. The Permit Sonoma CWP website is https://sonomacounty.ca.gov/PRMD/fire-prevention/community-wildfire-protection-plan/ That's the Permit Sonoma CWP website. If you scroll down near the bottom, it has the links to the upcoming 4 meetings for the 4 remaining supervisorial districts and how to register for those meetings. Our hub site is the place that Esther showed you, where you can download data, where you can look at the results. You can see the results from our meetings that we did last year. You can see all the local CWPPs in Sonoma County. You can see a lot of the other wildfire hazard risk assessments and analysis that have been done in Sonoma County over the last couple of years. It's just a great source of information. And that hub site, Christina just put into the chat, I'm going to read it aloud, is https://arcg.is/MZC4L0. And finally, the CWPP draft is in the Adobe Cloud that Christina mentioned. So you can go on there, you can either log in with your name or do it anonymously, and you can select text and put a comment in, and we'll get that. And just so you know, that is public. So anything you put up there, everybody is going to see. And that link is https://adobe.ly/3pwgualj. No, GUAU. Sorry about that. My old eyes. 3pwguau. And finally, the project email for the CWPP team at Permit Sonoma that Christina just put in the chat for any specific questions is Permit Sonoma-Wildfire-Plan at sonoma-county.org. Again, all of that is in the chat. If you need any help accessing these sites, please email us. And finally, if you'd like to hang out and talk with us in our virtual parking lot, we'll be staying on for another 15 minutes to answer any questions you may have. Thank you again for being with us tonight to help complete the Community Wildfire Protection Plan to prepare Sonoma County communities for wildfire. And with that, good night.